Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Gas mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna cook a meal that's gonna make you mine. We're turning up the oven, now we're ready to roast. When you touch me, honey, you'll love it the most. Come on and put me in your loving shoe.
Welcome to another Bitflix.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's returning guest is director, filmmaker Daniel Draper. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stuart. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. I feel like we've coordinated the orange. People can't see this. I'm looking at an orange wall. I'm wearing an orange neckerchief. I think we've accessorized very well. But we've not come here to talk about clothing and interior decoration. We are here today to talk about Liverpool Story, A Portrait of a City, directed by Daniel Draper. First off, I loved it. It is a beautiful, almost dreamlike ode to a year in the city that shines a light on the brilliant and wonderful things that go on because of who live in the city. It looks way beyond what you might perceive to be the tropes and cliches of Liverpool and find it's the people who make a city vibrant, interesting and welcoming, and not the buildings or iconic institutions.
It sounds great. I couldn't put it better myself. I mean, you could have written the synopsis for us, really.
It is an absolute dream of a film. We will also do 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. So, without further ado, let us move on to talk about Liverpool Story. Now, I know I've done my view of it, but tell, for the audience's benefit, do you want to give what you see as the brief synopsis for Liverpool Story? What is it for you?
In short, I suppose, yeah, it's a year in the life portrait of a city. So it's a documentary, obviously, but I suppose the leading lady is Liverpool this time, as opposed to, we've made films in the past, the documentaries in the past about people and events. This is about Liverpool and portraying the nuances of the city, and it's almost just the city as it is and how it exists over a year, rather than making statements about the city. It's just to see how the city lives and breathes from the 1st of January to the 31st of December.
Indeed, and I felt like within that bigger sort of umbrella of a story, which is let's start at the beginning of the year and finish at the end of a year kind of thing. I thought there was some sort of beautiful, I think storytelling full stop is for me, and not just for me. This is good. I can't claim this one. Tolstoy said that storytelling was about transition. And I feel like there's some absolutely gorgeous transitions in terms of what you did with the film. So, for example, there's a guy cleaning shop windows, and it's the city it's a kind of city waking up sequence. And then you cut from that to old decrepit buildings sort of crumble, literally crumbling in front of your eyes. There's nobody knocking them down. They're just crumbling in front of your eyes. And I was just like, it was just kind of like that. You almost kind of gave a city sort of an organic feel, like it's like it is living, but at the same time as new days are born, parts of a city are dying just as quickly as new bits are opening up again.
Yeah, that's interesting. That you picked up on that particular transition, because there's loads of them, and the purposeful, because although it's a documentary, we wrote a script. So I think there's about a 30-page script.
Okay.
Because we wanted to portray every area within Liverpool and covered the season. So we wanted to be balanced. So it's almost in 4 parts, the film, roughly. And each part has this exact same amount of areas and covers certain things. And we wanted to shoot certain areas in certain seasons. So yes, the transitions are there sort of quite on purpose, in many ways. But also they sort of write themselves into the film because so that scene you're talking about there, the wake up scene, that'll be for the final chapter as we go into winter. And by that point, the city starts to inform the film because you'll have been filming there for about 9-10 months already, maybe longer. And you start to realise that there's certain things creep in, and sort of they're unavoidable, and almost they present themselves in the edit in many ways.
How do you, as someone that's grown up in Liverpool, sort of kid yourself into seeing this Liverpool that you've known and loved with fresh eyes? Because to sort of, it's quite an ambitious thing, and a city is not a person, that's for certain. It's an amorphous, almost like ephemeral thing, as much as it is physical, and there's thousands of millions of people. But actually, if you try and put your hand on what a city is, it's lots of things, which is obviously what your film does brilliantly. But what did you do to prepare yourself in terms of trying to sort of give it fresh eyes? Because obviously the audience who see it, most of them are not going to have seen Liverpool or very little of Liverpool. So,
yes, well, that was maybe one of the reasons why we did it, really. It was this idea of sort of looking at the city in a way that it hasn't been presented before. The city's always present, and everything it's present, whether it be a sort of a YouTube video that the football clubs put out, or something set in Liverpool, whether it be film or sort of documentary or TV. The city is very much present, which means the same sort of images and sort of tropes are sort of trotted out in many ways. So the idea was, well, we just slow it down completely. Because Liverpool, I think every city's got a rhythm, and Liverpool's rhythm, much like the accent, the Scouse accent, is quite quick. Really, quite fast, you know what I mean? And moves as quick as the Mersey in many ways. So we thought, well, let's sort of create the antidote to that and slow it down and look at focus on the minutiae and focus on the everyday and the ordinary, really. Because I don't know, I think that's equally as interesting. And everything we think about Liverpool, so from within and without or outside Liverpool, people have opinions on it, don't they? Whether it be about the working class nature of it, the sort of the politics, the passion, football, or the musical heritage. It was like, well, why don't we focus on them things, but focus on them in a different way? You know what I mean? And sort of, what is it about? What are those human elements that are interesting, and what do we strip it back and try and find? I don't know, things we don't know about, things in the shadows, maybe.
I loved your decision not to interrupt the viewing by maybe telling us where we are. I mean, sometimes they speak for themselves, but I think having watched it, and I didn't know most of the places, so, if I'd not been before, I mean, obviously I know Goodison and I know Anfield and I know the Cavern. I mean, most of the world knows those things. So that wouldn't need to be explained. But obviously you go to quite obscure locations as well as sort of iconic or traditional places. But you don't interrupt it with any words to go, this is this and this is that, because that would have been that would have been a list, wouldn't it? I suppose, in a way. And then you insert voiceover, which is often incongruous to what I'm watching. It's almost like it's a mood rather than an action. But then also you then mix that up in terms of the rhythm of the film with some real sequences, which are almost like dramatized. If it's something as simple as the organ player and his relationship with you, which was kind of nice, is that okay? Is that okay? I mean, I love the final punchline when he's sort of 20 yards away. Is that okay? I love that. But, the kinship caregivers, the recovering addicts, the hobo kiosk, and even the New Year's Eve in the pub, suddenly you make us focus on people because they're talking to the camera now. How did you find that balance between what was... Because obviously you'd have got, in all the locations you shot in, you've got people talking to camera at some point, but obviously you didn't need it in every single location.
Yeah, I suppose it was a mix of, it's walking the street. So as I say, we had a script, but like, you know, we'd say we'd go for Norris Green, for example. I would have a script of what I want to cover in Norris Green, whether it'd be like, because there's a big Polish community there now. I'd be like, we'll get that in, but we'd also leave room for just the area to inform it itself. You know, when people say what we should film. So in terms of the documentary approach, it was always going to be like on sort of the areas it was always going to be a locked off camera, observational kind of thing, and then just seeing if people would interact with us on camera, and then leave that in many ways. You know, I think if I was making this film as my first film, I might have had the courage to leave those things in where the fourth wall's broken and people are asking if they can walk past the camera, or, you know, to do that take again. You know, we're almost breaking it down, like, oh, this is just a normal person who works in a shoe shop and we're asking them to do this for a cutaway, rather than sort of,
I mean, it's like a crass comparison, but I remember interviewing Johnny Owen talking about his documentary, I Believe in Miracles, and he had a choice at one point to either leave in his own laughing at what the person had just said from the anecdote, or professionally take it out. And he decided, because he'd done a few, like you, he had the courage to go, actually, no, I want that moment's important, and he left it in, which, if you were making it for TV, for, you know, for whatever, that'd be like, oh no, take that out. We need that off the track.
Exactly, yeah. But, you know, and it's that confidence to realise, well, actually, you know, it's about Liverpool and it's about all these communities and the year and whatnot, but it's very much a subjective film because, you know, documentary is a subjective medium. You know, I'm out there with the camera, I'm pointing it when I want to point it at, I'm editing it. So you think, why sort of hide the fact that there's a person behind the camera making a choice, you know, in many ways. And that refers back to the choices, the voices. Sorry, you know, the voices that you hear, they're sort of, they're not like historians or academics. They're just 20 different people who I know, I care about, I know, or I've got to know, or care about those people in that film, the voices, you know what I mean? And they're there to represent maybe voices, you know, they're almost like ghost-like, the voices, you know what I mean? That's why we don't put any names up or anything like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, again, it doesn't, I think for someone listening who's thinking about if they get a chance to see this film, it's like, it really doesn't interrupt your viewing. And that's what I think is, you're having to, as an audience member, the work you're having to do is listen, pay attention, because you're not sure when the voice is going to come in. And then, but don't forget to look, because you might be seeing something interesting as well. It's not to say that you just go bland while somebody's talking. It still is beautiful imagery of different parts of the city or different aspects of the city. So, I mean, I applaud you for those decisions. The other interesting thing the other interesting thing, it makes it sound like there's about three things, but there's many. But a thing I noted for the point of this interview, just to break a fourth wall myself, is as well as voiceovers and those moments where people are genuinely talking and it's a sequence, is the whispers drifting in and out. What was the reason for that choice, in terms of what was that lending the documentary from your point of view?
Yeah, so the film was shot over 2023, but it's the idea that the ghosts of the past are still present on the landscape, kind of thing. That whole section of the, you know, whispers and voices on the landscape was inspired by the Gavin Bryars album, The Sinking of the Titanic, and this notion that, you know, the Titanic's band played on as the ship sunk, and then forever their music sort of reverberates from the seabed to the waves for eternity. And it's this idea of like just playing on that, because, you know, Liverpool's an old city. It's 815 years old, so I get great comfort as someone who lives here, knowing that many people have walked these exact streets and have went through maybe the same things in my life or the same emotions. And I'm not really spiritual or anything like that, but I just like the fact that, you know, these are well-trodden paths. And I just wanted to have a little nod to that. And some of the voices, you know, for example, you know, ones of it, like you might say, it's quite like old-fashioned voices or sounds old because it's from a VHS. But some of the voices are from my sister when she was young. My sister now lives in Australia. Some of it's my nan, who sort of, you know, is no longer here. But in many ways, if I go around Broadway, Norris Green, for example, area of Liverpool, my nan's still on that landscape. You know what I mean? And that makes sense. So it was a way of getting the past in there in a very present film, but in a subtle way.
No, it's beautiful. It's a very beautiful thing. Like I say, it as far as the viewing experience goes, it's all part of the push and pull with the audience member for me, because I felt like I'd relax into a rhythm, then you just introduce another voice. I'm like, oh, I don't know this voice. So I'm having to, and you meet someone for the first time and it's like, oh, that's a funny accent.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've never, the film makes sense to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've never actually sort of put myself in anyone else's point, boots and thought about it that way, but that's quite interesting. But then that's good because the whole idea was the river was important to the story and we wanted to represent this idea of like the ebb and flow and the fact that Liverpool's never sort of static. So yeah, that push and pull you mentioned, maybe that's a good thing, and we've achieved what we set out to.
And with the River Mersey and stuff, it's it's in and out, isn't it? It's really it's the lung, it's like the lungs of Liverpool, isn't it? In some senses. One last question then about the film, and it's one I remember asking you this when you did the one with the run up to when Boris Johnson won the election. I asked you, what did you learn about democracy in Liverpool that you didn't know before you made the movie? So now this is like you've gone like you had micro with Dennis Skinner, then macro with Liverpool as a city voting. Now we've got Liverpool the city, this amorphous thing. So you as a citizen of and someone who's born and bred there as well, what did you learn about Liverpool that you couldn't have perceived before you made the movie?
Yeah, I've been asked this question a lot lately, and I don't really know if I have an answer. So I'm probably going to contradict myself here, really. So in many ways, the city is like everywhere else. I think if you watch the film, it's about all the micro communities that make up Liverpool as a whole. And those communities aren't unique to Liverpool at all. Everything that we depict in Liverpool Story, you'll find in every other city in the world. I think that's why I think the films could be seen as a film about humanity and just the passing of time and whatnot. But I think what the film does try and capture is maybe the ingredients of Liverpool. So if every city has those ingredients, how much of each? So, for example, let's say the Irish community in Liverpool.
Yeah.
It's a big Irish community, and we want to get that across. We get Gaelic classes across, so we might have more of that in Liverpool than we might have in Newcastle kind of thing. So that's what we wanted to focus. I think maybe that's one thing I've learned and maybe understood the sort of the rhythm of Liverpool in a deeper way. Because if you relax for a year and just make the film and walk the streets, you get into the sort of frame of mind really and try and understand the rhythm. And I don't like to sort of say I understand the rhythm of Liverpool now because it's been 2 years since I shot the film, so I think the rhythm's changed already.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of like, we go through, we get it, we go through life and we have to work and we go to the same shops and we go to the same places. But I gave myself the excuse for the whole year to sort of, create a little kink in the algorithm and sort of get lost and go down things. So maybe I've discovered that Liverpool contains. It's more interesting. I think what I've discovered is I think Liverpool is more interesting than people in Liverpool, not outside it. Maybe give it credit for.
I would.
You know what I
mean? I think you bang on, and I think that's one of the. I think what you've highlighted by making that observation, and I felt the same watching the film, is that we have become because we're very connected because of the phones and stuff. We accidentally or on purpose live a very algorithmic life now. And that's been, a continuation of a breakdown in what the traditional community, there's, you read about criticisms of 15-minute cities, like as if it's we're gonna have no cars anymore. Whereas like 50-minute cities, it means that the guy or the woman that works in the local fruit shop. That's all it means. It doesn't. And I think that what you do is you shine a light on the fact that, and I kind of tried to say it in my summary at the beginning, but you shine a light on the fact that cities are people and people are communities, but communities are not. There's not a Liverpool community. But also, if you were to dare to say in any city, as you say in the world, oh, there's nothing to do here, then you're not looking hard enough in a way. And I think by you giving yourself permission to almost be bloody nosy around Liverpool, purposely spot what's going on that wouldn't ordinarily be given the attention of the film. I'm reminded of, do you ever, Jeremy Deller's Folk Archive? Did you ever see that? Yeah, so you know the way, I mean, one of his big achievements was to get a bunch of people who ordinarily won't be recognised for what they do, standing in the Tate Britain and being recognised in an institution which is there to sort of applaud and acclaim culture. And here they were doing this stuff. And I think what you've done is frame a bunch of things that wouldn't necessarily be given the focus, and suddenly they are, because they are all part of the city, every single one of them.
Yes, and to go back to the origins of the film, some of the influences on making the film was in many ways 120 years old. So we're looking at Mitchell and Kenyon films. Mitchell and Kenyon came to Liverpool and filmed Liverpool at the turn of the 20th century and almost late 19th century, and they would just film street scenes. Right. That was it. They would then sort of charge people the next day to come and look at the scenes, see themselves, just on a main street. Do businessmen, but it was this idea of like capturing the city in its most basic form, so that was almost like in there the birth of cinema. So it was just like it was sort of dynamic. It was just like it's just people in the streets because we've got cameras working, and it was about almost stripping it back to that. It was like going, this is the city in its most basic form in many ways, and I think that's why the film exists, because this film could only exist because it was self-funded. It could only exist by someone who was weird enough as me to like Mitchell and Kenyon and decide to sort of make a 2-hour version of one of those films. 100, but it's interesting. So it's been 2 years since I finished filming it, and I feel like, to go back to your question before, I feel like I understand the city less than I did 2 years ago.
Good.
Already.
Good.
Yeah. But I get a sense of comfort out of the city's moved on, you know what I mean? And like, it's not static, and these things have moved a little bit. And I also miss that, and I also want to, it's like having a really close friendship or relationship with someone, and then you don't see them for ages. I've almost got that relationship with the city again now, but I want to get back to that sort of, that intimacy. So yeah, I'm going to have to come up with a new project.
So then tell people, how can they see the movie?
So yes, we're still doing screenings. It'll be available online and even DVD and Blu-ray at some point. The old school. Yes, we've got some screenings in and around Liverpool naturally, and it's travelling slowly. What we're trying to do with each screening is have a Q&A. So we're taking it up to like Glasgow and Newcastle, and we'll have a Q&A with someone local there, whether it be a photographer or an author, and talk about the themes in the film and how basically they relate to each city. Via our social media.
So people if people follow you on the Instagram or the Facebook, do you want to tell them where they can find you?
Yes, so Shut Out the Light Films, or at SOTL_films. That's where everyone updates everything now, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'll put links in the show notes then to that information, and when we have news of physical and online releases, we'll add that to the information. But thank you for now for talking us through Liverpool Story. So, Daniel, we are now moving into the 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. You can think, I will get rid of the thinking time if you need to, so don't worry about silences if you want to pause for breath and pause for thought even. And every time you hear this sound... You can hear that okay?
Yep.
Brilliant. That will mean the 5 minutes are up, and we'll finish that chat. I mean, you can finish your thoughts. I'm not, it's not dogma. We're not doing podcast fascism here, but it means that we give each film at least 5 minutes chit-chatter. Okay?
Excellent.
Okay. Right then. First out the gate, Dan's first choice was a labour of love for the director, cast and crew. Due to the very low budget, it had to be shot intermittently over a period of 2 years, often at weekends when equipment was cheap or free, and is now considered one of the greatest British movies of all time, according to Time Out, and is in Stephen Schneider's 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. It is a film about the lives of an English working-class family, told out of order in a free associative manner. The first part, Distant Voices, focuses on the father's role in the family. The second part, Still Lives, focuses on his children. I'm talking about Terence Davies' debut feature, Distant Voices, Still Lives, from 1988. Where does this fit in your film watching life?
Well, yeah, before I go into it, I didn't realise it was shot on the weekends. That's cool. Yeah, that's quite interesting. And then when you watch it, you're like, oh my God, really? Like, that's amazing.
Isn't it amazing?
Like, oh my God. Because you associate something shot on the weekends to be a bit haphazard and sort of a bit run and gun. You'd expect handheld cameras, improvisation, wouldn't you? But like when you watch it, it's so sort of restrained and beautiful.
I should add, by the way, the only bit they didn't do like that way was the workman falling through the glass plane. They actually hired a James Bond second AD or second director unit guy to shoot that, and it cost them $10,000.
That was $10,000.
Did it in one take.
Oh my God, it's amazing! Oh my God, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, oh wow! Oh, learning something new about sort of one of the most special films in my life, I suppose. Really, yeah. But to go back to why Distant Voices. So yes, I like most people you probably speak to. I grew up loving film and sort of studied it myself, collected DVDs, watched. Yeah, and it's usually Hollywood films, isn't it? Which you start and then you start to develop, you know. And then it was not until I was at university, I must have been 18 or 19. I can't remember how. I must have been doing some research. I come across Terence Davies, and I was just like, so being from Liverpool and being into film, like, oh, this is a Liverpool filmmaker. I didn't know there was one. And then it's like, oh, it's Terence Davies. And then you look and you're like, oh, he's not just a Liverpool filmmaker, he's an absolute master of his art kind of thing. And it just literally, it blew my mind, really. And still does. You know, the reason I picked it is because, you know, he died last year, didn't he? Terence Davies, and Fact in Liverpool screened the film again. So I sort of thought, I'll go and watch it again. And the film would become something else to me. And it felt like a relative in many ways. So I think I've seen it 5 or 6 times. So I've watched it at 18, over 20 years. Yeah. Really. And I don't know, just things that have happened in my life. Terence Davies passing, I was just like, oh, no, this film means something to me, and I'll watch it again in 5 or 10 years, and I'm sure it'll mean something else to me. It's just, it's film as art.
What in what sense do you mean? Because I think I was talking about this with another guest recently, and it was the idea of when they first watched The Exorcist, they were young enough to watch it from Reagan's point of view, and then they watched it 20 years later, and suddenly they're the mother because they've got their own kids, and suddenly they can only see it as a kid in. It's no longer a demonic possession film; it's a child in peril film.
Yeah, that's a good point, really. Yeah, I think it was the idea of death more than anything else.
Okay,
that sort of maybe why I've seen it in different eyes. Maybe it was Terence Davies' death. Maybe it was I don't know. Maybe I think my grandma probably passed away since the last viewing, or at least, you know, maybe it was more. I was thinking about it more. And it's those ideas of those family dynamics and what you say and what you don't say, and just, you know, it's. No one has ever sort of. I don't think anyone's ever filmed interiors as well, or you know, or as Terence Davies, and not just any interiors, staircases and like doors. You know, doors in sort of working class tenements kind of things, you know, it's just like, and the way the camera moves and the use of music, it's nostalgic, you know, it's nostalgic because he was writing from, it was the sort of semi-autobiographical, but it's nostalgic in very much a present way. Yeah. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's probably a stupid film to pick to talk about, really, because it's a film I don't necessarily like to talk about, because I almost like to sort of just feel it, like I understand it. You know, I feel like that with David Lynch films, that like I don't really like to talk about David Lynch films because I just like to sort of.
Well, there you go. There's your cue. But just I have to ask you though, when you as a student then coming across a Liverpool filmmaker, how did that affect you? You know, did you? Because the reason I ask is because I remember finding out that Danny Boyle comes from Radcliffe, which is a post-industrial town 10 miles north of Manchester, which is where I grew up. And to find out Danny Boyle come from there was like, freaking hell, you know, because and I only found out by accident. It was only when he won the Oscar in 2011 for Slumdog Millionaire, and he brought the entire world's media to the Catholic club by the tram station in Radcliffe, and I saw my mate's dad walk by in the background while some Granada news reporter sticking a microphone in Danny Boyle's face, and I'm like, "Friggin' hell, that's amazing!" I mean, so did it? Was it? What I mean is, I suppose, is it inspirational when you discover that talent isn't all in Hollywood?
Oh God, absolutely. But then it also sort of makes me. It's dual. It makes me angry that most people in Liverpool don't know what Terence Davies is at all. You know what I mean? When we should have a cinema named after him, or a film festival or something. But then also, I don't really want to share him.
It's a catch-22, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I'm just like, no, I want to keep his films to myself. You know what I mean? I've got to share the Liverpool Football Club with everyone else. I don't want to share Terence Davies.
Fair enough. That's very well put. Yeah. Right then, sir. For your second choice, we have a highly acclaimed documentary from the year 2000. It's 67th in the Sight and Sound list of the greatest films of all time in 2022's poll, and is included in Stephen Schneider's 1001 Movies to See Before You Die. So two of your choices are in that 1001, and it's 99th in the BBC's 100 Great Films of the 21st Century. In it, the director films and interviews gleaners, which was a new word to me, in France in all forms, from those picking fields after the harvest to those scouring dumpsters in Paris. I'm talking about Gleaners and I by Agnes Varda. Tell us, Daniel, where does this film fit in your film watching life and film memories?
About 7 or 8 years ago, I think I came across this. I was going through a whole Agnes Varda stage and watching everything. I've nearly watched. There's just one film of theirs I haven't watched. I've watched nearly everything now. Features, documentaries, short films. I've been obsessive. The way I'm with Werner Herzog, it's the same with Agnes Varda. But this documentary, what I like about this, Agnes Varda have had all the accolades for 30, 35 years up until The Gleaners and I. But I love the fact that such an established filmmaker would sort of hit the streets in the 70s with a DV cam to make this sort of, a street film, effectively, in many ways, about people sort of, gleaning bits of food to get by in the turn of this century.
Yeah. And where do you see this for the first time?
It was movie. Yeah, it was, just movie. Just in mid-binge one night, I put it on and thought, clearly this is quite special. And she did a follow-up a few years later, which is equally as good. But it's just the freedom in which the sort of the film has, and it's just effectively, it's this idea of like a film can be about sort of something so simple, you know what I mean, and ordinary people, and people again maybe sort of operate in the cracks and the shadows of society, and the beauty that can be found in that in many ways. And I don't know if you've seen the one, but the beauty that can be found in just a potato.
I've not seen it. No. And I was I'm obviously intrigued to see it. So do you see, having done that kind of binging of a work, what evidence do you see of these kind of documentaries in your work?
In my own way, no, it's more the approach and the idea of not sort of not that I've got any laurels to rest on, but like the likes of Agnes Varda and like Werner Herzog, they sort of if they couldn't get funding for films, they would just take control of the situation. You know what I mean? And I think that to me is really sort of inspiring. And also as well, if you're making films that don't require budget in terms of you don't need permissions, or you don't need sort of expensive equipment, then literally the world is your oyster, because there's stories on every sort of corner, really, in many ways. And to me, that's just incredibly exciting. So if I watch The Gleaners and I, after watching it, the first thing I want to do is to sort of start walking the streets with a camera, you know what I mean, and to see what sort of happens. It just activates a sort of level of inspiration. I'm just like, oh no, the sort of, I understand that we can, you can write stories with pen and paper on the computer in the house, but then that almost seems a little bit sort of static to me. All of a sudden, it's like, oh no, as a filmmaker who likes documentaries, you've got to sort of hit the streets and interact with people and see where that goes.
I mean, I was lucky enough, not when I was doing my podcasting, but before then, I interviewed John Pilger about some of his films, and it was him that sort of introduced me to the concept, and it's obvious once it's told to you. And I'm sure I'm just telling you to suck eggs here, but when you make a documentary, because of the subjectivity of the camera, you can only tell a truth. You can't actually tell what's going on behind you. You can't tell what's out of periphery of the camera. So there is a great deal of trust in what you're doing, but also there is a great deal of freedom as well, because you can't have responsibility for what's going on behind you, because that isn't in the film.
Yes, and it's quite liberating once you sort of realise that. Because a lot of people, who maybe not into sort of cinema, they think documentaries are good because they're interesting, or they might think that they're objective, which, they're not. And also, you should judge your documentary as a piece of filmmaking, not just by the subject in many ways. But once you realise that,
Finish your thought.
Yes. Once you realise that, you are telling a story from a singular perspective, that's when you can start having fun, really, and get uber creative with it as a medium. I think that's why great filmmakers always sort of, reverted to documentaries when, as I say, funding has come through, whether it be Abel Ferreira, Wim Wenders is still making documentaries, Fellini was trying to make a documentary up until he died. I think it's because, Orson Welles with FFA, I think, yes, the great filmmakers realised that potential with documentary, I think.
Indeed. Right then, for your final choice, your third choice, is a documentary from the Czech Republic. It is the life of an ordinary Czech woman, explored through several decades of her life. The documentary observes several important societal issues. We're engaged to the struggle and the fight back with the subject of the documentary as her life unfolds before our eyes, particularly as she deals with the breakdown of her marriage and her daughter's unexpected death, which almost drives her to suicide. I'm talking about Marcela by Helena Treskova. Where does this fit in with your film watching life, and what fond memories does it hold for you?
Okay, when you sent the link over, I panicked and thought, what three films would make me seem interesting, really. But then I thought, no, I'll be honest, and I sort of, and I don't want it to make it all sort of retrospective, so if I watched Distant Voices for the first time 20 years ago, Gleaners and I 7 years ago, I thought I'd go with something I watched quite recently. So I think I came across this film about a year ago. There's a great streaming platform that just has documentaries on called True Story, and they have a load of films by this filmmaker called Helena Treskova, and I think she describes herself as a time-lapse filmmaker. This idea of sort of she would film people for years of their lives.
I mean, this is part of a study of 6 newlywed couples, isn't it?
Yes. So she started off. She filmed. It must have been in the 80s. 6 newlywed couples, and I think that's a series in itself. But she stuck with one of the women from one of these couples for, well, it must have been over 20 years. Yeah, really. It came about. I wanted to watch it because last year I binged the 7 Up series. Yeah, and just I just felt empty when it was over, really, and I needed to replace that long form documentary filmmaking with something. And then I came across these films, and Marcela. I picked Marcela for a reason, because the character of Marcela is like, you just care. Or Marcela, I'm not too sure how you say it. Anyway, you just care for her. Literally after the film ends, I was thinking about her for weeks. The way they did with some of the characters from 7 Up, and I still think about it now. I went to Prague, the film set in Prague. I went to Prague last winter, and again, it's like Ghosts on the Landscape. I was almost looking for this woman, because that's, as you mentioned, she's an ordinary woman. It's a life of an ordinary woman who just goes through ups and downs. That's effectively it. But Treskova's done that with many different people, and all the films are fabulous. But this character in particular, I really care for, because you just can't catch a break in many ways. You know what I mean? And why it's influenced me, because I want to make a film like what Helen Treskova did. I want to find someone don't know who. I've been looking for a year, but I want to find someone who I then filmed for 20 or 30 years. Like the Gleaners And I, it just inspired me to do something, because it just shows that no life is ordinary. You know what I mean? And no working class life is ordinary. That's what's more important. The people she focuses on are all working class. And what happens to this woman? You're a screenwriter. If you put this in a script, people would pull you up on it, go, this wouldn't happen to a regular woman, these things in this woman's life.
Yeah.
But they do. And just a resilience to keep coming back. And also to go back to the subjective thing with documentary, there's an obvious relationship between Trestakova and the subject in it, you know what I mean? There's a level of care, and you can see the relationship develop over years, kind of things. And it's just sort of, it's beautiful, it's sad, it's heartbreaking, it's inspiring, but it's almost like, it almost replicates what it is to be a human, really, and have human friendships and relationships, the film. And it's a film that's, even though I watched it last year, it'll sort of live with me forever, really. Yeah.
I mean, I've not seen the film, but knowing what it's about, and I imagine when you do study someone for decades, you do form a relationship. But I'd be fascinated to know, like, what the power dynamic is there, you know, because somebody pointing the camera at you has created an obligation. If they keep coming back, let me pause that. They've created an obligation for you now. And then where's the line between, especially, there's one thing to show someone doing an activity, or, you know, go visit them once and have a chat and find out, and then go off and find other people to talk to. There's another to keep coming back and reintroducing yourself into their life and filming where we're up to. And interesting what we were talking about before about transition, you know, obviously the elliptical nature of the way time can pass in film, where I'm guessing this is an important part of how Marcela works, is that you will jump forward to a point of like, well, what happened then? I mean, 7 Up does it, obviously, literally, in the way that it's time to work as a show. I'm not quite sure what my point is here, but I suppose you as a filmmaker, while you're looking for a subject, for want of a better expression, how do you give yourself comfort that you're not exploiting somebody to make a film, as opposed to collaborating with somebody to tell a story?
Yes, that's a good point, isn't it? I think it boils down to sort of from my point of view, it's almost not seeing myself as a filmmaker, but just as a person, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So like, I never sort of get permission signed or anything, because I just feel like anyone I interview or film, I'm in agreement with them. You know what I mean? If they want to see the film before it goes out, they can do, because I've got no agenda other than just sort of presenting sort of regular or working class people in many ways. But yeah, it's difficult. You know, in Liverpool Story, for example, you know, we interviewed a homeless lady, and that was hard. And I struggled. I was like, well, is this my story to tell? You know, she obviously agreed to be in the film and whatnot. And I struggled to watch it back in many ways, because it feels a little bit too, like, that moment we met and she agreed to do it, it felt like really trustworthy and sort of like, not intimate, but, you know, she allowed us to film and she trusted the camera and she let us get close with the camera. And then to watch that back feels odd, because it's no longer live and it's no longer real. You know, that moment's past, that meeting's past. So that level of trust that we had there and in the space between us was gone. And now it's the distance of being in an editing room and, you know, there's trust in you. So, yeah, it's something, I don't really struggle with it, because I don't feel like I'm manipulating people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just present people, but it's something, the more intimate scene is, the more I find it stranger to edit. In many ways.
Yeah. I mean, do you get the sense that part of what was going on was she had an opportunity to tell you that story? Because obviously what people see on the street is somebody who's homeless and destitute, whereas she told you her history, and it's like, well, I don't see that when I look at you, which is, you know.
Yes. Yeah, maybe. And yeah, I think that's why I sort of, that's why it was certainly going in the film from the off, because again, it's almost like that unspoken contract. It's just like, if someone, you know, she cries, this lady in Liverpool Story, someone in that moment has trusted you to sort of, you know, let you in and say, you know, tell me a little bit about the life, then that can't be undercut for, you know what I mean? Because again, I've got to respond to that as a human, you know. I don't know why, as an indigenous filmmaker, why would you want it on the cutting room floor? Because it's a human story, and the film's effectively about humans.
Exactly. Well, look, thank you for sharing with us 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. I've certainly got 2 that I need to see now. And thank you for sharing some stories about the making of Liverpool Story. Remind people, how can they keep abreast of when they can watch it and how they can see it? What the social medias?
Shut Out the Light Films, which is at SOTL_films.
Brilliant. As I said before, I shall put that in the show notes, but it just gives me to say thank you very much for giving us your time on the Britflix podcast.
Thank you, Stuart. Thanks for taking the time to watch the film. Glad to talk to you.
Hey there, Hugh from Podderation here. If you like today's show, why not have a listen to Board Gamers Anonymous, one of the longest running board game podcasts out there. Join Anthony and Chris every week as they discuss everything in the board game world, from card games to miniature games and more. They talk about some of their favourites and hopefully help you find your next ones. If you want to check the show out, you can find more information at podderation.com.